So, and I'll be honest with you, those are some of my favorite memories from WJCU. Not the dollar amount that was raised or any of that, but so many students come through on Radiothon Saturdays. When Joe is on the air, when Ray King is on the air, when Terry Stevens is on the air. And so many of those students have that aha moment when they're in there on that day. I'm sure Mark knows, and Mark has plenty of those memories of those aha moments. When you see the light bulb go off for a student who's just getting into the radio station, or maybe they've been around for a while and they're just kind of hanging around, and then the light bulb sort of goes off, and all of a sudden it seems to make sense for them. Joe does that for so many of our young people that are currently involved in WJCU, where they come in and they see what Joe does, the connection that he has with his listeners, and all of a sudden it all seems to make sense for them. And they start to do more, and their shows improve. And I think that is in large part due to what they hear when they come in on a Saturday afternoon in February and get to see you do it. So, Joe's also been nominated for Best Community Volunteer Hosted Show in the country, as well as Best Pledge Drive. I don't see how you got hosed on Best Pledge Drive, my friend. I'll say that. You're a shoo-in this year in my book for that one. But I wanted to share something that someone who nominated Joe had to say when they nominated him. They said, Joe brings a passion and enthusiasm for his radio show that is unmatched. His love for records in mono power, flipping that baby over and turning the music up to 11, I told you I don't do it justice, speaks to his many fans that grew up listening to local Cleveland radio stations and disc jockeys during the 1960s and early 1970s. You cannot help but feel the excitement he conveys with the vinyl 45 records and albums he discovers and shares with his audience. Today, with 20 plus years at WJCU, Joe continues to entertain his radio fans with no indication of slowing down. He represents John Carroll and WJCU proudly, and that's evident with the success of his raising funds for the radio station during Radiothon each year. His interview with the late Eric Carmen was exceptionally good. Watching Joe's energy on videos of his show, managing his turntables, answering phone calls, and talking about the music he plays simultaneously is phenomenal. Cleveland and WJCU are extremely fortunate to claim Joe as our own, but his fans are from all over the world. He brings people together with his love for music that he plays, and he certainly does that. Joe, I'll tell you, one of my favorite memories, in addition to your radiothons, was the day that I got to crash the basement and break into your show and tell you that you were going to be here tonight being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And so now it is my privilege to formally induct Joe Madigan into the WJCU Hall of Fame.
It's a bit surreal. Hotline. Better answer it. It might be the phone. Thank you, Yogi Berra. 21 years ago, on October 5th, 2003, I introduced myself for the very first time on the air on WJCU. I was a shy and nervous 19-year-old freshman at John Carroll University, but I was excited to be on the radio. I never imagined that exactly 21 years later, I would be inducted into the WJCU Hall of Fame. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, but since most of my extended family lives here in Ohio, we would come up to Cleveland a few times a year. In fact, I met Dr. Finucane and her kids long before I came to John Carroll University because my great-grandfather lived right next door on Loyola Road. In the fall of 1997, my dad, my Uncle David, and I were cleaning out my great-grandfather's attic, and we came across my uncle's old record player. And on the dust cover was a round, yellow Wixie 1260 sticker. And my uncle pointed to that sticker and said, "That's the radio station everyone listened to when we were kids." He then told me I could keep the record player. While the record player could play LPs, it was specially designed to play 45s, so of course I needed to go out and find records to play, which I started collecting before it was considered to be cool. A few years later, I was in the car listening to Oldies 103 in St. Louis, and the DJ was lamenting about being stuck in the studio on such a nice day. This is obviously when DJs were live and local on commercial radio stations. And I just remember thinking about his comment, and I remember saying out loud, "Dude, why are you complaining? You get to play music and talk to 500,000 people on the radio. You've got the greatest job in the world. And that's when the light bulb went off. I said, hey, I think I'd like to be on the radio. In October of 2002, I toured John Carroll University, and I vividly remember seeing the studio for the very first time. We were walking down the hallway, and we stopped at the window that peeked into the studio, and there was this tall, lean, long-haired guy with aviator glasses queuing up a record, and I remember thinking how cool it was watching this guy. And that was by far the best part of the campus tour. That DJ in the studio who looked as if he had just time traveled from 1982 was none other than WJCU Hall of Famer Mitch Kapka. When I came to John Carroll for freshman orientation in the summer of 2003, I snuck away from all the corny activities that were going on, and I went to the radio station, and I knocked on the door, and I said, hey, can I see the studio? And they said, sure, come on in, and they let me hang out in the studio. And it was just so cool to be there. WJCU is definitely where I wanted to be. So that fall, I did the DJ training as an apprentice on a show called Vinyl Venue with John Baryak, which was the perfect match for me because not only did we play records, but John pretty much allowed me to take over the show, which was great because I learned a lot that way. And in November, I recorded my demo and submitted my application for a show. Now, I wanted to do an oldies show, but not just any oldies show. I was trying to figure out how to make a show unique and stand out from all the others. I didn't want to play the same 300 songs over and over again. And that's when I remembered the Wixie 1260 sticker on my record player. So I Googled Wixie 1260, and I found Dan Exton's website that was devoted to Wixie 1260. He had links to recordings of Wixie 1260 and copies of the Wixie 60 survey. I had no idea that Cleveland had their own version of the Billboard Hot 100. And that really opened up my world because I discovered songs that I had never heard before. Then I listened to a 1966 recording of Jack Armstrong on Wixie 1260, and that's when I came up with the idea for retro radio. I still remember the staff meeting in November of 2003. We were all at Pizzazz, and the director in charge of programming went up to each of the new DJs to tell them when their on-air shift would be. Now, most of them were on 3 to 5 a.m. or 5 to 7 a.m. I didn't care what my time slot was going to be. I just wanted to be on the air on WJCU. Well, the director finally came up to me and said, sorry, dude, we don't have a time slot for you. So I'm sure you can imagine my disappointment, but it also turned out I was the only one who did not get a time slot. Now, I am the first to admit, I am not the most talented or polished radio DJ, and I certainly don't have the greatest radio voice, not even close. But what I did have was an enthusiastic passion for radio and records, and I was determined to be on the air on WJCU. So, in January of 2004, I was back in St. Louis, and I just got home, and my mom told me there was a message for me on the answering machine. I didn't have a cell phone back then. So the message was from Matt Taylor, offering me the only time slot left on the schedule, Sunday mornings from 5 to 7 a.m. And hearing that message was one of the greatest moments of my life. Now, I am not a morning person. My wife can testify to that. I was afraid of oversleeping on Sundays and missing my show, so I would stay up as late as I possibly could on Friday, sleep in as late as I could on Saturday, stay up all night Saturday, do my show, and then go to bed Sunday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I did that for 13 weeks. I eventually got a better time slot, Tuesday afternoons from 3:30 to 6:30, and that's when many of my great listeners discovered me for the very first time. I would actually schedule my classes around that shift so that I could keep it. It was very important for me because that continuity really helped me build an audience. I never imagined that I could connect so well with I never imagined that I could connect so well with my audience. In fact, many of my listeners became great friends of mine. Radio is truly a companion medium. And WJCU has meant so much to me and has been a big part of my life. Outside of being a husband and father,
you could do it, Joe.
You gotta breathe.
You could do it.
outside of being a husband and father, it is the ultimate honor to be inducted into the WJCU Hall of Fame. Especially as a member of the inaugural class.
Dude, this is good.
I mean, I get to be inducted with the founding fathers and with Bill Peters and Mitch Kapka. I mean, Mitch Kapka and Bill Peters were already legends when I got here in 2003. Because WJCU means so much to me, Radiothon is a big deal for me each and every year. Out of all of my accomplishments, I am proudest of the amounts that I've helped raise over the last 21 years. From my humble beginnings, I raised a grand total of $30 during my very first Radiothon. 20 years later, I raised over $13,000. Altogether, I estimate that I have helped raise over $75,000 over the last 21 Radiothons. WJCU has... I'm emotionally attached to this radio station. So, WJCU has given me a great opportunity to live out a dream. And I want to help ensure that future generations of students have the exact same opportunity. That's why I do these radiothons each and every year. I do it for you guys. And I stress that I helped raise the money because I could not have done it without the greatest listeners in the history of radio. In fact, I did not get here on my own. There are so many people who have helped me over the years, and I want to take this time to thank some of them. First of all, I want to thank God and for all the tremendous opportunities and for the people He has brought into my life. I thank my family, especially my parents. They're here tonight. Drove up from St. Louis to be here, and I thank you for your love and support and encouragement over the years. I thank my beautiful wife Amanda for her love, her support, and understanding. Many of our children who also enjoy listening to records wanted to be here tonight, but as a consolation, I told them that I would give them a shout out. So a special thank you goes out to my children, Molly, Edith, Charles, Margaret, Peter, John, and Timothy. That's 7 children in case you lost count. And if you think that's great, just wait till next May when we welcome baby number 8. Surprise! One of my radio philosophies has always been to be unpredictable, and that goes for Hall of Fame speeches too. It is impossible for me to thank everyone who has helped me over the years, but I want to make sure I thank John Baryak, Lisa Angel, DJ Michelle, and Guitar Maxwell for their kindness and warm welcome when I joined WJCU in 2003. I want to thank Dan Exton, who supplied me with the Wixie 60 surveys and records in the early days. A lot of these songs were not easy to get back then. Remember, there was no YouTube. I thank Dave Atkins and Tom Fallon for their friendship and for supplying me with records that really helped make retro radio stand out. I thank Matt Taylor, the student station manager back in 2004, who gave me a chance to be on the air on WJCU. I thank Mike Young. I miss Mike Young. And Ray Glasser. I thank them for their help when I hosted retro radio. I thank Eric Simnow. He had to put up with me. He had to put up with my frantic phone calls when there were technical difficulties. And I want to thank him for putting up with me for a few years as his original co-host on Neo Rocks. I thank former General Manager Bart Krieger. Matt's introduction was fantastic. It was spot on. Mr. Krieger really did a fantastic job here at WJCU. He kept this radio station relevant and viable at John Carroll University, thus keeping this radio station alive to see year number 55. I thank former General Manager Trent Maverick, who was supportive and assisted me with my transition from retro radio to the basement show. I thank our current General Manager Jasen Sokol for carrying the torch and for his tremendous leadership and for caring about the history and legacy of this great radio station. And I want to thank the WJCU Hall of Fame committee for electing me and deeming me worthy of this great honor. And finally, I want to thank the greatest listeners in the history of radio, who I affectionately refer to as my basement dwellers. Thank you, basement dwellers. If it wasn't for you and your support, I would not be here. You are a major reason why I am here tonight, and I am forever grateful for your support and for your friendship over the last 21 years. I want to conclude with this. When I first came to WJCU, people would ask me if I planned to work at a real radio station someday. And I would say yes, as it was my dream at one point to work at WMJI. As time went on, I realized that I would never have the creative freedom or the amount of fun at any commercial radio station. So later, when people would ask me if I planned to work at a real radio station, I would answer, I am at a real radio station, one that reaches the minds and hearts and souls of listeners in Cleveland, Ohio, and across the globe. And I can't imagine being at any other radio station except for this one, WJCU. You can clap that. Until we meet again, friends, I'm Jumpin Joe Madigan, reminding you to keep that volume knob cranked all the way up to 11! Thank you. Thank you, everybody.